I was asked to speak on the geopolitics in South Asia. And, you know, I was thinking about it and I realized that actually it makes sense because you may not be interested in geopolitics, but geopolitics is interested in you, whether you like it or not. Why do I say this? You consider the three themes that we're considering here. You look at climate, for instance. There hasn't been a binding international agreement on any issue of consequence for over a decade and a half. You will say to me, no, what about Paris? What was Paris? Each government said, I will tell you what I will do, but you have no right to check on what I do. That's not a binding international agreement which has consequences. And this is true of all the transnational threats we actually face, all the big issues that really bother us today: development, developing country debt, climate change, of course, but migration, you name it. It's a decade and a half. Why? Because of geopolitics, because we are now in an age of great power rivalry. And great power rivalry, in effect, stymies us from acting collectively. So what you have is plurilaterals, you have minor coalitions of the willing, issue-based, you have partial agreements in bits and pieces. Now this is good or bad, depending on your point of view. If you're big and strong, this is a world you can live with, you can manipulate it. But it's not a world which suits most of us, or most of the world. So climate. You look at connectivity. Yes, we're in a globalized world economy, right? And it's still globalized, despite everything that everyone tells you, deglobalization and so on. If you look at the proportion globally of trade to GDP, it's stayed steady since 2011, roughly between 55 and 60%, just minor variations. So we're still globalized. It's certain sectors where obviously high-tech, things which have dual use, which you think might work for your adversary militarily and so on, which have. But what's happened is that increasingly globalization itself is driven by geopolitics. And I don't mean just sanctions, economic sanctions and so on, but you look at the direction of trade, you look at global supply chains. Over the last 12 years, manufacturing supply chains have grown shorter. You look at onshoring, friendshoring, China +1 strategies, all these. What are these? These are driven by geopolitics. These are not economic calculus. This is not economic calculations which are leading to these decisions. And increasingly, world output is concentrated in three big areas, and people trade more and more within those areas. So today, politics is in command of economics, whether you like it or not. That's why I say that geopolitics is coming for you. And this is why our third theme is critical to finding solutions, because community today is very, very important. What geopolitics has done is it has made the UN, multilateral organizations, ineffective. And if you think of it, why are they ineffective? No use blaming the organizations. And they're staffed by some very good people. But they are organizations of member states. So if member states are quarreling, how do you expect the organization to be effective or successful? I mean, it's unfair to blame the poor organization, which we all do all the time. It's really the member states themselves. And geopolitics doesn't seem to be leading to any different situation. So today, if you ask me, what kind of world are we in geopolitical terms? For me, we're in a world between orders, which is driven by great power rivalry. Now, how do we cope with that? And how do we promote what we need for ourselves? You've heard for the last day and a half what we need to be doing, how we need regional cooperation, what we need for connectivity, for the climate, for community. But for me, therefore, because geopolitics has made international cooperation of the traditional kind through multilateral organizations more difficult, we therefore rely on community. And that's what we heard over the last day and a half. We've heard how community can step in. in many ways, we're in a strange situation. We are so used to thinking of international relations in terms of states, but the state is actually weak. State structures are not delivering. And this is one reason why, by the way, I think states are brutal today, more brutal today than they were earlier, when they were more powerful. But that's a whole different argument. But because the states can't deliver welfare in a time when the global economy is slowed down tremendously, when states have been diminished by the pandemic, by a whole series of things, how many people actually believe in politics anymore, or politicians? You heard somebody just said that we don't listen to politicians, right? So you've got to a situation where you therefore look for other alternatives. But societies are strong in all our countries. It's societies which have stepped in. You see the pandemic experience. In many of our countries, state was absent, but the society stepped in. Voluntary action, private sector, NGOs. I mean, it was society, community, which actually stepped in. And for me, that's the hope. So now that I've cheered you all up about geopolitics, let me tell you why I'm an optimist about the future. And I'm an optimist about South Asia, actually. And again, there's a paradox. I'm an optimist about South Asia because we are in a polycrisis. Because for too long, we haven't cooperated. We haven't done the things we should be doing. We're one of the least integrated regions. I don't need to say this to this audience. You all know the mantras, what we've inherited. But what the crisis does, and crisis I say because in the last 3 years, 8 governments have changed in South Asia, not all of them willingly or happily, or constitutionally, but anyway, whatever it is. You know the economic mess. The IMF especially knows the economic mess, why we are all talking to the IMF about adjustment programs. But also we're going through huge social churn thanks to the changes. But that crisis is an opportunity. It gives us a chance to actually escape forward, to do things that in normal times are difficult to do, that we can't do normally. And I mean, my favorite example for this is what India did in '91. We were in terrible crisis, both political and economic. And the world was changing around us. In 1991, the Berlin Wall had fallen, Soviet Union vanished. But what did we do? We did basic fundamental reforms, which we all knew for many years we had to do, but hadn't done before. It's a similar moment for South Asia today. Now is the time for us to actually break our old habits, this zero-sum politics, where if somebody else is gaining, then I must be losing. This idea among ourselves, between the states, because now you can get past the states, you can work with civil society, with community, you have ways of doing things. And for me, that's why the last day and a half was so hopeful, because it suggests to me the ways in which we can work in a difficult situation, and that crisis actually gives us the opportunity. So, and we have this choice. Do you want to be objects of other people's policies, or do you want to exercise your agency in South Asia? And for me, the choice is obvious. We now have capabilities we didn't have 30 years ago, 40 years ago. You just heard that digital panel. You couldn't have done this 10 years ago. You couldn't have heard what they were saying. And we can empower our people. We have the chance to make a difference. What should we do? I think we all know what we should do. We are the least integrated. Build the supply chains across our borders. I mean, I think Manmohan Singh used to use the phrase, make borders irrelevant, which to my mind is what we need to do both mentally, digitally, every which way, economically, and where we have done that, actually, we haven't done badly. And the digital space is where we actually seem to we have enough examples, I think, that we can show to show how this works, to change our old mindset, and pick the ones that really help our development. And that's the only criteria that we should be applying. The welfare of our own people, what improves their welfare, pick those ones, prioritize them, do it. So I don't think it's an impossible task. I actually think that this situation today gives us a chance. I'll stop here and because I see there's still a little bit of time, but I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I'd like to hear what you think, whether this is just Menon being contrary, or whether you really think there is an opportunity for us all together. Thank you. Anyone?
This is Sagar Koirala from Nepal. So my question is a bit quirky. So it is related with Himalayas. So like the rising geopolitical tension between our two neighboring nations. So they are like excavating and a lot of tunnels are going on and our Himalayas are being a threat. So like from a geopolitical perspective and as a like analyst, you are I think analyst of Indian analyst to China. So what do you think will that have on the environment and what will it have in Nepal and other neighboring countries? So it bit out of context, so but I hope that you are one of the like, from a geopolitical perspective, maybe you can answer it.
Well, you know, I think countries like Nepal have always looked for outside balances, right? Not just to get away from this whole predominance of India in the subcontinent, but also looking for other opportunities to create. Now, great power rivalry actually creates opportunity for everybody. Exactly for balancing, for hedging, for bandwagoning, if necessary. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. Suddenly, everybody sees opportunity. Russia thinks they have an opportunity in Ukraine. You know, you look at Hamas thought they had an opportunity. Now Israel thinks it has an opportunity. What you're seeing in the world now is that there isn't an order, a settled order. But the same thing is happening within South Asia, if you look at it. The more there is great power rivalry, the more important Nepal comes. Why is everybody here? Why is China, the US, why are they all courting you? Why are they trying for the Millennium Challenge or Belt and Road? Why are people saying Nepal should be part of the Indo-Pacific strategy when you're landlocked? It gives you an opportunity. It gives you some leverage in the system which you didn't have before. Luckily, I'm not an Indian diplomat anymore, so I'm going to tell you, use it. And I'd say that to everybody, because India does it to other people. I don't see why we don't expect other people to do it to us. So I don't see this as a terrible time where, in fact, your options have actually opened up because of the crisis, because of the nature of the geopolitical situation. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but I'm not fully satisfied. I'm just small.
So what do you want to do?
They allow me. So like recently in the Gift City, I think, in Gujarat, Vibrant Summit was organized in Gujarat.
Yeah.
And even the Prime Minister was there. So, and even we, Nepal, have been organizing investment summit similarly. And we have like opened the call, like we are going to soon organize an investment summit. But what do you think that the government, the agency, should do to attract the foreign investment in Nepal? So like the Vibrant Gujarat Vibrant Summit was a huge success and it had a lot of investment coming. So what lessons do you do Nepal learn from that?
You're asking the wrong person. I have no money and I don't know how to tell other people what to do with their money. But for me, the simple answer is people put money where they think they'll make money. So you have to convince them that they'll make money. Whether they will or not is a different issue. But you have to create that impression at least. But you know, you're asking completely the wrong person. My record with money is not good enough to justify any comment to you. Yeah. Anybody else?
Thank you. It was wonderful to listen to you. So is the crisis the reason behind the realization that countries do things for themselves, but they don't do everything against like something? For example, India always, as people say, if you do something with China, it is not against India, right? There are things Nepal does with China for themselves as well. So is the crisis the only reason for it, or there is something, a deeper realization within the establishment or the governments that, you know, things should be looked differently?
You know, I think crisis sharpens the mind, no question. I mean, it concentrates your mind. But this business of Indians seeing anything you do with China as somehow anti-Indian, or the Chinese seeing anything you do with India as anti-Chinese. I won't deny, there are Indians who think like that, but it's a shrinking number. There are less and less Indians who think this is the Indian subcontinent, that we have some exclusive role here which nobody else has. And over time, if you look at it, the secular trend is positive, meaning there's people who understand that different people have different interests, they're going to follow it. But I do believe that there is sufficient congruence of interest within the subcontinent that even if people act purely selfishly, we will end up doing some of the right things. In our own selfish interests, we should be doing more connectivity, we should be doing much more integration, we should be doing much more cooperation among ourselves. And I don't see that there's a contradiction between this. Yeah, maybe some people have come to this realization only after the crisis. If so, thank you, crisis. But I'm not so sure, because even before this, I think the basic trend over the last 30 years, at least in thinking in India, has been in the right direction. Not that everybody is convinced of this, and I speak only for myself here. But yeah, I think it does help to concentrate the mind somewhat. It's an interesting problem, actually, how the perceptions change. And also, if you look at it the other way around, over time, confidence in themselves, in India's neighbors, has actually grown also. To an extent that, which to my mind is very positive. Even though we might have our own domestic political problems, our economies, whatever, but those are our own internal problems, but our ability, our confidence to deal with each other, which is why I find it very sad that, and I'm not surprised, but I'm sad that the state-to-state institutions that we've had, like SARC and so on, are non-functional, right? So therefore, go to community. Because if we are confident, then let's get community to work together. Use the private sector, use every other means that you have available. That's my argument. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. I mean, it means more work. But it means that more people will be working rather than just some bureaucrat. You know, I do think that, as I said, my faith in the multilateral system is minimal, especially now with the relationship between states, and it's formed by states. But I do think that digital gives you a chance for societies to talk to each other directly, to actually participate in each other's daily lives in ways that we never had before. So you don't need intermediation. You don't need the old state structures or the old multilateral structures to speak for you, to carry your message to other people. And to me, that's where all this is leading, what we've been doing yesterday, today. Ultimately, if we can get enough of these conversations and links going, then I think you've got something that's positive. It says zero to me, it's shutting me up. Thank you very much. All the best.